first 2 days of the 2025 NFL Draft are in the books, and the Eagles have added 2 players to their roster. Linebacker Jihaad Campbell from Alabama and safety Andrew Mukuba from Texas. So look, I'm not going to break down these players as if I was glued to Alabama or Texas tape or wherever the hell they were before that. I know Andrew Mukuba was at, I believe, Clemson. I'm not going to act like I was scouring the internet to watch highlight film. I wasn't. Let's just talk about the positions because that's what we know. We have no idea as NFL fans if these picks will pan out, if they're good, if they're bad. I often laugh at NFL draft grades, which are given out post-draft, because the reality is we have no idea. I often think back to, and I have to give credit to PFT from Barstool on this, he brought up a famous post-draft grade of the Seattle Seahawks when they took Russell Wilson, and they crushed that draft. They built a championship roster from that draft, and this particular post-draft grade just ripped them to shreds. So the reality is, I can sit here and I can give you a grade. I don't know. You don't know. No one knows. Jihaad Campbell could be the greatest player of all time, and Andrew Mukuba could be the greatest safety we've seen since Brian Dawkins, or they could end up being, Jason Short, and let's go with Macho Harris. But let's talk about the positions because that's what we know that the Eagles addressed. I was a little surprised in round 1 that they ended up going with a linebacker because it seemed like that was actually a position group of strength. You signed back Zach Baun, which I think for me and a lot of Eagles fans out there was the number one priority entering the offseason, was bringing back Zach Baun. Zach Baun no matter what. It wasn't Vontae Mack. It was Zach Baun. They did that. Great. You add in, though, the linebacking core that they have. I mean, technically, Nolan Smith is a linebacker. I don't know how many people actually view him as a linebacker. Like, I view him as more of a defensive end hybrid type, but more of a pass rushing defensive end. But nonetheless, he's technically a linebacker. You know, you add in Jeremiah Trotter, who looked good. You do lose Oren Burks, who ended up looking really good when Nakobe Dean was out, but Nakobe Dean's coming back from injury. So there's, I guess, in a way that there is a need for this position, but I just didn't think it was overall a pressing need enough to address it in round 1. With that said, Campbell was a player that on the experts board was rated very, very highly. And to get that kind of player at the 32nd overall pick, it reminds you a little bit of when they took Nolan Smith and when Nolan Smith dropped for virtually no reason. Howie Roseman has made really his bones in the draft of recent years by capitalizing on those guys that just happen to fall. And you don't really know why they're falling, but they fall. I mean, you think back to Cooper DeJean a year ago. No one could figure out why Cooper DeJean kept falling. Howie Roseman's like, I can't figure this out either, but let me go do something about it. He ends up trading up with Washington, grabbing Cooper DeJean, and we all know what happened with that. So Howie's kind of made a living on doing this and taking guys that for whatever reason, you know, a Jalen Carter, a Nolan Smith, they drop, you capitalize, and you end up getting a really good player. With the safety position, I was a little bit surprised with that as well. I thought the team had a little bit more faith in Sidney Brown, and I thought that a group of Reed Blankenship, Sidney Brown, I thought that would be a good safety group, but obviously the Eagles thought differently. You got to remember, too, like Sidney Brown was coming off an injury last year. You haven't gotten a ton of tape on him. I'm not complaining about taking Mukuba, and I'm not complaining about taking a safety in general. I was just a bit surprised. But when I look back on what I personally wanted the Eagles to do, and I made a video about this, I wanted them to take right tackle of the future, and I wanted them to take a tight end. And when I look at the tackle position, tackles kept going, okay, fine. I don't necessarily, I'm not going to rip them to shreds for taking a position that if everything breaks correctly, you don't end up seeing them on the field in round 1. It's a future pick. You know, you're doing it for the future of the franchise, not necessarily next year. You're doing it for the year after and the year after that. You don't necessarily know if you took a tackle where that guy, when he would even play, because, you know, it could end up being a situation with Lane Johnson like it was with Jason Peters where you thought every year was going to be the end, and he ended up kind of just sticking around for like 3-4 years. Jason Peters, I felt like was a little different because Andre Dillard just sucked. But even though that's what I would have personally wanted them to do, I didn't have a name. And when a guy like Campbell drops, okay, fine. Then you look at the second round, and I think ideally the Eagles probably would have wanted to go after a tight end in round 2, just like they did years earlier with Dallas Goedert, and just like they did years before that with Zach Ertz. But as the draft started to materialize, those tight ends weren't dropping. It wasn't like a year earlier with the cornerbacks that were dropping, like, Cooper DeJean, as I just talked about. Tight ends weren't dropping. They were going where they were kind of predicted to go. After the draft ended on Friday, Howie Roseman did speak to the media, and he mentioned how he was looking to trade up, but the price to trade up was just too rich for his liking. I thought it was a really interesting tweet that Zach Berman from PHLY put out about Howie Roseman, and it's this philosophy with the draft, and it's just getting as many picks as possible, which makes sense. I mean, the past couple of years, it's like you constantly are hearing, well, over the next two drafts, the Eagles have 157 picks. Well, in the next 3 drafts, the Eagles have, because they look to trade out, and they look to accumulate assets and accumulate future picks, and it dates back to, and I don't remember the exact draft, but there was a draft where the Eagles didn't have a 5th-round pick. Howie Roseman punished himself by walking laps around the building until they were up to remind himself to never put himself in a position to not have a pick in a round. When you factor that in, when you factor the fact that he's not going to want to give up a ton of assets and leave them in a position where they only have, let's say, 4 picks in a draft, maybe 5 picks in a draft, and ironically, they kind of had that in 2018, which is really where Howie Roseman ended up making a lot of his money. That 2018 draft class with Mailata and Josh Sweat and Avonte Maddox and Dallas Goedert. But he doesn't want to do that anymore. He doesn't want to put himself in a position where he only has, let's say, 4, 5, or 6 picks. So because of that, you're not going to want to give up a bunch of assets to trade up in the second round from the last pick in the second round. You're not going to want to trade up because that price is expensive. So I think as the draft materialized and you looked at, okay, ideally, yeah, we would want a tight end. You've got Dallas Goedert going into last year, as I brought up in the previous video about why trading Dallas Goedert would be foolish. You're not going to really want to usher in the Grant Calcaterra era. And I don't think they're going to do that next year. But they're putting themselves in a position, though, where I feel like next year and in the draft, everybody's going to know they're going to be looking at tight end because I doubt that they end up re-signing Dallas Goedert. There's just a lot of mileage on that body. He's not finishing seasons healthy. Overall, though, I can't complain about what they did. They got hopefully 2 guys that are going to impact the team next year. They did lose a lot, especially on the defensive side. You end up trading C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Well, hopefully you just replaced him with Andrew Mukuba. And because of Nakobe Dean's injury, you can put Campbell in a linebacking position, or you could just have him rush the quarterback, and they do need rushers. So I don't necessarily have a problem with what they did. I'm not over the moon about it. I'm interested to talk to some people that actually follow college football, but there's really no complaints. It's not backflips like it was the previous year when you end up stealing Quinyon Mitchell and everybody knew that he was the number 1 cornerback in the draft and you didn't have to trade up or back for it, and you end up getting Cooper DeJean around too. That was backflips galore and ended up panning out. This year's a little bit different, but it's going to be interesting to see what the Eagles do on day 3 because they ended up trading out twice of the 3rd round, and they've put themselves in a position where they're going to have a decent amount of picks in rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7. So a lot of times you kind of end up making your roster that way in rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7. Like Andy Reid, if you look at his drafts, typically speaking, he didn't really hit a lot of times on the top picks, but he would hit on the Jason Kelce's, the Trent Coles, and I'm drawing a blank on his name, so smash that thumbs down button for this. Todd Harriman's 4th round, that was the guy I was thinking of. He would end up hitting on those guys, and the top picks that you were expecting to make that impact, the Victor Robbie and Miris of the world, they would end up busting. So, look, the draft is a crapshoot. I think we all know that, but early returns, at least from my opinion, is the Eagles ended up picking guys that, at least in round 1, had, for whatever reason, dropped, and you end up taking kind of best player available in that situation, in Jihaad Campbell. He should make an impact next year. In round 2, you end up taking a need in safety, in Andrew Mukuba, but it still leaves them with a hole at tight end. I do think they'll address tight end in day 3, but once again, that's kind of a Grant Calcaterra spot. That doesn't mean that you can't get a good player. I've just mentioned a couple guys that Andy Reid hit on in day 3 of the draft. Well, one of those guys was Brent Selleck. He was a 5th-round pick out of Cincinnati. Maybe you get another Brent Selleck. Maybe you get another really good tight end who ends up having a decent and Eagles career and ends up being your number one guy for a while. We'll see. But overall, it's a good thing that the Eagles were drafting last because that means that they won the goddamn Super Bowl. So go Birds. Well, the NFL draft is in the books, and the Eagles have made their selections after a painful day 3 that I will get into. The Eagles end up with Jihaad Campbell, the linebacker from Alabama. They also end up with Andrew Mukuba from Texas, the safety. Those were the day 1 and 2 picks. I kind of already did a breakdown on those guys, so if you want that, you can just hit the tab in the upper right-hand corner, and you can see my take on those guys. But in day 3 of the NFL draft, which is days 4 through 7, the Eagles ended up trading back a few times, acquiring some more assets, some more picks. So here's who they ended up getting. They ended up getting in round 5 after trading back cornerback Mac Williams. Hit thumbs down for that snafu from UCF. They then in round 5 grabbed linebacker Shmael Mondin Jr. Definitely butchered that name, from Georgia. In round 5, they also grabbed Drew Kendall from Boston College. He's a center. No word if he'll end up sticking at center or they'll move him to guard. Local kid, round 6, they grabbed Syracuse quarterback Kyle McCord. And round 6, they also grabbed offensive tackle Miles Hinton from Michigan. Another offensive lineman goes off the board in round 6 at pick 207. Offensive tackle Cameron Williams from Texas. And then final pick of the day was pick 209 in round 6. Edge rusher Antoine Powell-Ryland from Virginia Tech. So in a nutshell, you've got a linebacker, a safety, a defensive tackle, cornerback, linebacker, center, quarterback, 2 offensive tackles, and an edge rusher. Okay. So the day 3 situation was interesting only because of one aspect. It became obvious to a lot of insiders out there that the Eagles were going to end up taking Shadur Sanders, who had dropped to round 5 of the draft, and then the Cleveland Browns ended up kind of pulling a Howie Roseman. They jumped in front of the Eagles to end up taking Shadur, which was interesting because they already took Dylan Gabriel in round 3, but they end up bringing in Shadur Sanders. Eagles end up getting Kyle McCord later on in the draft as kind of a project, quarterback number 3 situation, just in case their quarterback room ends up suffering injuries or whatever. But overall, it was interesting how they kind of loaded up on the offensive line late in the draft. I'm a big fan of that philosophy. I think if you give Jeff Stoutland that many shots, he's going to end up getting one of these guys to be a serviceable NFL player. Whether it be the 2 offensive tackles, whether it be the center, I firmly believe one of those guys will end up sticking with the Birds because at this point, Jeff Stoutland is in the room. He's getting asked his opinion on whether or not to take a guy, what he thinks of them. We all know the story about him kind of pounding the table for Jordan Mailata in round 7. I have no idea if these guys are going to be Jordan Mailata or they just end up being, King Dunlap. Well, King Dunlap actually had a decent career, so for all intents and purposes, for a round 7 pick. But the Eagles end up with all those picks. The interesting thing, though, I also think with this draft, which became evident to me, was while the Eagles kind of loaded up on day 3 with quantity, maybe quality, we don't know yet, but quantity at least, and that's kind of been a calling card of Howie Roseman throughout his tenure, the Eagles have positioned themselves with some of these trades to have potentially 12 picks in next year's draft. Now, I'm going to probably screw this up a little bit, and I'll put a graphic up, but I believe they're going to have, obviously their first or second round pick. I think they're going to have 3 thirds, and one of those is going to be a compensatory pick, so we'll see. A fourth, it's 4 fifths, 2 sixths. They've positioned themselves to have a lot of shots at this. This wasn't necessarily thought of as a really strong draft, so I like the idea of the Eagles kind of punting, if you will, for next year. I mean, they obviously picked up some talent, and they took some shots, but I like the idea of kind of recouping picks for the following year, which is, from what we hear, supposed to be a better draft. So there you have it. There's kind of my uneducated Eagles breakdown because, as I said in my video about Jihaad Campbell and Mukuba, I wasn't watching Alabama tape. I wasn't watching Texas tape. I can't tell you if these guys are going to be good or bad. And honestly, even the experts have no idea how these guys are going to be. Every year, these post-draft grades come out, and it's kind of laughable. Hopefully, though, these guys all end up being incredible players, and this is the greatest draft class of all time. It always takes a little bit for you to figure out if a draft class hits or not. I think it's safe to say that last year's draft class is the outlier because you end up getting impact from Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. But I think 2021 was the year that we figured out that the 2018 draft class was really good. I mean, you went into that year with question marks galore regarding a lot of the players, and they pretty much all hit. I think 4 out of the 5 ended up getting contract extensions. Avonte Maddox, Dallas Goedert, Jordan Mailata, and Josh Sweat, I think all ended up getting, that year, ended up getting contract extensions. The other interesting thing, speaking of Goddard, is the fact that he's still on the team. Now, it was interesting afterwards because Howie Roseman said, as of now, the way he worded it, was like, Dallas Goedert is currently on the team or something like that. You wonder if they're still looking to shop him? I find it hard to believe. Yeah, he's not the first or second option, and he's not even the third option. But he's still an important member of your offense. I would be really surprised if post-draft they decide to move on from him. But we've seen more surprising things from Howie. I never expected after the Super Bowl that they would move on from C.J. Gardner-Johnson, but they ended up doing it. To close out this draft, I'm going to say a potentially scorching hot take amongst football guys. But hey, it's just us girls talking. The NFL draft is an unwatchable product. Maybe it's the fact that I've gotten older, I have less patience, but I'm sitting there watching day 3 of the draft, and it is a painful, drawn-out process that the NFL has taken and made an unwatchable product. And you cannot convince me otherwise. And the NFL has done this with a few different events, one of them being the schedule release. The schedule release should be nothing more than the schedule being released. And yet, they kept hyping it up. May 14th, and it's going to be an 8-hour schedule release. It's absurd. It's ridiculous. It's drawn out. It's unnecessary. I don't need the 4th round of the draft, the 4th fucking round of the draft, taking 2 hours. And it took 2 hours. That is bonkers to me. Why did it take 2 hours? Well, I got to hear from some dude in Australia. He's got to pop on in. Shrimp on the Barbie. I got to hear from Paris. Oh, Germany's checking in. Enough. Just make the picks. Because what ends up happening is those feeds from Germany, from Brussels, from Italy, all that, takes a while to actually get, set it up and all that. So you end up having, and I'm watching NFL Network, Charles Davis, Rich Eisen, Daniel Jeremiah, trying desperately to kill time. Luckily this year they had the Shadur Sanders topic. But then you end up getting crowd shots that I don't need. Some woman carving the NFL draft logo out of cheese. What are we doing? Now, on the flip side, you say, hey, dipshit, you could easily just change the channel. You're right. The problem became in the 4th round when I went, I just want to see what the Eagles take here. That's it. I want to see the Eagles take, and I'll probably check out. I'll check back in every once in a while. And they traded out. They traded down 15 spots. And when they traded down 15 spots, I said, I'm going to be here a minimum of 45 minutes. Now, this is on me. I got to look in the mirror because I easily could have left, came back in 45 minutes, and sure enough, they still hadn't picked. But if you're a football guy out there and you're like, oh my God, I'm dialed in for 7 rounds, more power to you, okay? That is unwatchable. The 4th round should take no less than an hour. Basically, day 3 should be done in about 3.5 hours. They should be able to get through rounds 4 through 7 in about 3.5 hours, and they don't. Because we have to draw out the process. We have to have these stories and fans and enough. Just make the picks. Thank God I don't have to watch a schedule release show. I mean, the people that watch that are psycho. So you're trying too hard if you're dialed in for the schedule release. I'm sorry. All right, I'm just saying the quiet part out loud here on sports YouTube. You're trying too hard. Especially with every team basically putting out their schedule release beforehand in a better form, in a better uniform. Like the Titans have done a great job of just stopping bachelorette parties and getting these drunk girls to be like, yeah, that logo looks like this team. It's hilarious. Most of the time the schedule ends up dropping early anyway. It ends up leaking out. And yet you've got Colleen Wolfe and whoever up there hyping it up as if it is opening day, as if it is game one. It sucks. It sucks so bad. I hate watched the draft today. Hate watched it. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I do appreciate it. I do like football, believe it or not. I just don't like a drawn-out process where, all right, we're going to give you 2 picks, and then we're going to go to commercial. And we're going to give you a pick, and then we're going to go to commercial. And here's 2 more picks. Commercial. A pick. Commercial. Overkill. Overkill. But hey, go Birds. Okay, now the beautiful thing about being able to do this channel, whether people watch it or not, is the fact that I'm allowed to talk about stuff that I want to talk about, and I don't have some 69-year-old guy barking in my ear, just talk Eagles. Thanks, Chief. Appreciate it. Never thought of that. What a novel concept. One of the things I want to talk about, though, is the fact that Shadur Sanders has dropped out of not only day 1 of the draft, he dropped out of day 2 of the draft. And I think a lot is going to be made of the fact that Shadur Sanders dropped out of the 1st, 2nd, and the 3rd round, because this was a guy that you looked at and you went, yeah, he probably should be a top 5 pick at one point. A lot of mock drafts had this guy going top 5. It didn't, it changed of what team, but a lot of people thought for sure this was going to be a, at minimum, top 10 pick. And you got teams passing on him. You got teams passing on him to take other quarterbacks. Well, the question then becomes, why? I think what gets forgotten a lot of times in drafts where it's not necessarily thought of as a strong quarterback draft, and this was one of those situations, this wasn't thought of as a strong quarterback draft, is the fact that we overhype some players and then they drop. And I could give you plenty of examples. Plenty. Like Bryce Petty, and I think 2016, at one point was thought of by many as a first-round pick. He ended up dropping to the Jets in the 4th round, and you never heard of Bryce Petty again. Matt Barkley was looked at as not only a first-round pick, at one point he was the number 1 overall pick. Now, he came back for his senior season at USC. He didn't have a great season, but still, people thought he was going to be a first-round pick. Drops to the Eagles in the 4th round. Malik Willis, at one point, was thought of as a first-round pick. Malik Willis was thought of as by some people as the number 1 overall pick. He dropped to the 3rd round. I think he's on his second. I think he's still on the Packers. Like, this does happen. Sean Mannion, I think, was another guy who was like borderline first-round pick, ends up going to the 3rd round. It's not unheard of that some of these guys end up dropping. What's weird about this situation is the fact that you've got other quarterbacks being taken. And that's a little bizarre. Now, I don't know about you guys. I was watching the NFL Network. And Joel Klatt and Charles Davis brought up a really, really good point. That right now, if you were to take Shadur Sanders, you're bringing him in to be your backup quarterback. This isn't a Cam Ward situation where he's probably going to start day 1. You're bringing him in primarily to just hold a clipboard. But the fact that Shadur Sanders is such a character, is such a name, is so well known, it kind of brings the circus to town. It reminds me a lot of what Cam Newton said when he was asked, why aren't you in the NFL anymore? Like, you're clearly good enough. And Cam said, well, look, if you've got a young quarterback and you bring me in, there's going to be pressure on the coaching staff to put me in. Because I'm a proven winner, because I went to a Super Bowl, they don't want to deal with that. They don't want to deal with the headache. So they just leave me out. They don't call me. In a way, I'm too good. He wasn't good enough necessarily to start and contend, but for the role of being a backup, he was too good. He brought too much pressure to the guy that they might be trying to develop, whoever that may be. Sounds a little ridiculous on the surface, but then when you really think about it, it does make sense. Yeah, okay. Let's take a guy like Cam Ward, okay? Cam Ward's there. He's throwing, looking all right. And then all of a sudden, Tennessee goes, you know what? We're going to sign Cam Newton. We're going to have the Cams. We're going to have the 2 Cams, and then Will Levis, you grab us coffee. Okay. Well, Cam Ward is going to start. But at the first sign of danger from Cam Ward, first cold stretch, you're going to have fans clamoring for Cam Newton because nobody wants to watch a bad product. I think the same thing's happening with Shadur. Where if you've got, let's say, and they picked a quarterback, They picked like a 29-year-old quarterback. Nah, the kid's 25. But if you had in New Orleans where Derek Carr might not start the year, okay, but let's just hypothetically say he does, and you've got Shadur Sanders, and Derek Carr starts the year, but he doesn't look like Derek Carr. His arm is clearly getting back into shape, and he's struggling. Well, now Derek Carr is trying to regain form, and he's having to hear the calls for Shadur Sanders. And there will absolutely be calls for Shadur. No matter where he ends up going, round 4, 5, 6, 7, undrafted, there will be calls for Shadur Sanders by sect of the fan base, whoever that fan base is. So when you look at some teams, for them, the juice is not worth the squeeze, i.e. the headache. And I think that was another thing for the broadcast I was watching, once again, NFL Network. They didn't bring up the elephant in the room, which is this is a guy that rubbed people the wrong way. He didn't rub me the wrong way for the record. I mean, I like the confidence. I like the swag that he brought. I like the fact that he believes in himself and all of that. But to some people, maybe to like a good old boys club, they didn't like it. They didn't like the way he carried himself. They didn't like the fact that he was going to workouts with Giants cleats. They didn't like the fact that he's walking around Indianapolis with 4 different hats of teams that desperately need quarterbacks. They didn't like that. Now, you obviously know where he got that from. He got that from his dad, prime time. But they also might not have liked the fact that you've got the question of if he were to go to the Giants, was Deion going to let him go? Was he going to hold out? Was he going to force a trade? Like, there was so much made of Shadur Sanders before the draft that you wonder how much of this is football related and how much of this is like off the field related. I'm not saying it's right. I don't think it is. And I don't think he'd be that much of a distraction. And I certainly don't think his father would be at practice demanding playing time and all that. But for an NFL franchise, they might be sitting there going like, I don't want to deal with Deion. I don't want to deal with the media circus. I just want to run a football team. So we'll see where he ends up going day 3. I mean, I'm sure he will end up going. At this point, I think we're all kind of surprised. But just remember, this isn't the first time a situation like this has happened. He's just a big name. He's just the biggest name to have it happen too. It's a bad quarterback draft class. But now you've got guys where they're going in round 3. And it's like, well, talent-wise, yeah, they're not Shadur. Like, Dylan Gabriel's a prime example. Like, Charles Davis on NFL Network's like, I talked to one GM. He said I drafted him as a backup. Probably not drafting Shadur Sanders as a backup. I thought LA would be a really good spot for him because Matthew Stafford isn't going to necessarily struggle enough where the calls for Shadur Sanders are going to be loud enough to really, I feel like, make an impact. I felt like that was a good one. LA thought about trading Matthew Stafford anyway in the offseason so like you could let him develop and learn, but then they ended up passing on him. Yeah, I don't know where he goes, but I think it's pretty clear that this is more off the field related than talent related, and it will be interesting to see how his career ends up going. Clearly, he's going to go in with a chip on his shoulder. And this has nothing to do with Shadur Sanders, but does anybody else find it really annoying? The forced, contrived, pick is in, let's go to the podium, pick gets announced, we have the player graphic, highlight reel, and then I have to see the war room where you've got 25 suits standing up and clapping, staring at a screen. We don't need that. ESPN, NFL Network. I don't need to see the war rooms. I'm good. I'm really good. I don't. Woo! Yay! We're so happy. Oh, shocking. I don't need to see 25 guys clapping because they just picked some wide receiver in round 3 from TCU. I'm good on that. The NBA announced on Thursday that the Sixers and Knicks will take part in a series of games in Abu Dhabi in 2025. The event will be held in Abu Dhabi's Yas Island. If you're a UFC fan, you know that as Fight Island. But the games will take place on October 2nd and 4th. And the key here, it's preseason. It is preseason. It is the NBA trying to get into an international market, i.e. the United Arab Emirates. I failed at geography, but I think that's what it is. But they're trying to tap into an international market is the point, and they're doing it with preseason games. This is how you do it. This This is how you correctly go into international markets. You do so with preseason games that the American fan, that the Canadian fan does not give a rat's ass about and won't attend. Take notes, NFL. Take notes, NHL. This is how you do it. Because as a fan of sports, okay, living in Philadelphia, I get really annoyed at these international games. I've seen the NHL start every season for I don't know how long, overseas in the Czech Republic. They do so, they play 2 games, and then those 2 teams take a week off because all the players have to get their bodies reacclimated to their actual time zone. And then, the season kicks off. Baseball did the same thing. Baseball starts the season off in Japan, and they started off on like March 17th, 18th, 19th, whatever it was. 2 weeks off. Cubs and Dodgers come back. And I understand that those games make a ton of money for the league, and that's all they care about. But as a fan, it's annoying. I mean, first of all, you just look at the market they're going into. Are we really looking to grow baseball in Japan? Pretty sure the Japanese players are like kicking our ass right now. You know, Shohei Ohtani is a legend. Roque Sasaki is the premier rookie. You know, he was the guy that every team is clamoring for. Like, I don't think we need to grow the game in Japan. I think we're good there. If you really want to grow the game, Rob Manfred, like put a game, I don't know, crazy thought here, put a game in like India. I don't know if anyone remembers the $1 Million Arm, the John Hamm movie, but like it was a noble thought because there's how many billion people in India. If we can get into that market, okay. The London games I don't necessarily dislike. It's kitschy. I just don't like starting the season off in these places, and I don't like the layoff. Baseball is the sport, though, where I go, okay, well, the season is so long where the layoff actually could do you some good. So if you go over to England or London, as the Phillies and Mets did, and you play those 2-3 games, whatever the series was, and you fly back and you got to take a couple days off, like it actually could do you, it could benefit you. Starting the season off that way, I think, is dumb. The NFL, I think, is the worst at it because they're trying to, quote, grow the game. And they're doing so by putting games in Brazil. I mean, the Jaguars play a game every year in London. I swear it is retribution for the 1776 and the Revolutionary War and all that. Like, it's payback. Like, nobody wants to see the Jaguars play. You're putting games in places where you're never going to put a team. You're putting the actual players at risk because the fields are always horrible. The games are usually pretty bad. So you're putting these premier players at risk to go to a Sao Paulo, to go to a London, to Wembley Stadium, wherever it is. And for what exactly? Because you're never going to put a team in London, ever. You're never going to put a team in Brazil. They never play a game, it seems like, in Canada, which would be an actual place that you should, think about expanding to. They had that one Raiders game in Mexico City. I thought that was an interesting move. Okay, I get that aspect. But you're never putting teams in Germany. You're never putting teams in Brazil. You're never putting teams in London. So what is the point? Okay, well, if it is to grow the game, Roger Goodell, and it is to make money, which obviously it is, okay, because the more eyeballs on the product and you've got German fans latching on, okay, I get it. Make it a preseason game because the German fan won't know the difference. NFL fans do not want to pay premier pricing, top dollar pricing for a preseason effort. The NFL did a great thing by limiting the preseason now to 3 games. I think we'd all be in favor of 2 games because season ticket holders don't want to pay the face value of a ticket to a game they're likely not going to go to or they give it away because they know that they're really not seeing the starters. You know who probably doesn't know that? The German fan. The German fan you're literally trying to grow the game, i.e. just introduce the game to. Because the German fan, you get old old Sven. It's more like Swedish, but whatever. Bear with me here. It's early in the morning. But you get Sven, all right? You get Gunther together. Sven and Gunther end up going to a game. Are they going to know the difference between Kenny Gainwell and Saquon Barkley? Doubtful. You're going to have to explain, no, this dude is the best. This dude is the guy you want to see. No. You could show them college football. You could show them Temple versus Bucknell. And it would be like that. You're just introducing the game to them so that they can latch onto it. And then they'll be able to figure out after a couple of years, okay, this guy's good, this guy. You get the point. So the NBA playing preseason games internationally, I think, is genius. I think that's the way it should be done. The NHL starting the season off in the Czech Republic is carbon copy of baseball starting the season off in Japan. You're growing the game in the Czech Republic? Were they not aware of hockey? Did they have no idea? Again, if you want to grow the game of hockey, go to Pakistan. I don't know if you've seen the Instagram reels of the Pakistani Hockey League. It's fascinating. I think I could actually play in that league and do pretty well at it. But grow the game there. But do so with a preseason game. Stop with these regular season contests that actually matter. Because you're putting the players at risk by doing so, usually, okay? Maybe not for the NBA, but for football, by putting them in bad field conditions, having them travel, having them go back. It's dumb. Do it with preseason games that me, you, and every other, North American fan doesn't give a rat's ass about. But no, the NFL is forcing, let's have a regular season German game. Why? Put the Falcons versus the Browns preseason game there. Stop starting the season off like this. Baseball, do the same thing. I have no problem with the London series, as I said. Because you kind of need that break. It's such a long season. I'm in favor of it. But if we're really looking to grow the game, stop making meaningful games be the game that you're trying to use as an example. Do what the NBA is doing. These games don't count. Here you go, Abu Dhabi. All right, I'm going to go now. All right, my old employer did it again. Beasley Media ends up cutting good buddy, Tyrone Johnson. Tyrone hosted the best show ever. He was Mike Missinelli's producer for a while. And boy, do I have some thoughts. Now, I'm not going to give you all my thoughts. I'm cool with setting a bridge on fire, but not necessarily torching it. And I know some people might be like, that's ironic because the bridge is already burned up, Chief. That's fine. When I found out that Tyrone got let go, and it's about a year since I got let go, I put a tweet out that said, when do the bosses start looking inward? When do these overpriced, overpaid, overrated bosses start looking inward and go, maybe it's me? I want to clear some things up with that. I was not talking about the head boss of Beasley Philadelphia, Paul Blake. I was strictly talking about the people whose last name is Beasley. If your last name is Beasley, you have no idea what you're doing. And it is obvious to every employee of Beasley. You have to understand, if you work in that building, these people are hated. Because they make the kids from Succession look like they are Jeff Bezos, Steve Jobs, and Mark Cuban all rolled up into one. And if you watch Succession, you know those kids didn't have a damn clue what they're doing. And that's basically Beasley. It's run by Caroline Beasley, and her brother, who have basically taken their grandfather's station, I think, their father's station, company, and just driven it into the ground. They never cut costs on their end. Somehow, even though it's a publicly traded company, they continue to keep their seats on the board. Amazing. The stock will come out. They had to do a reverse split because the stock was 60 cents. It is tanked. And they continue to cut and cut and cut and cut. And they cut last quarter and they cut this quarter. And eventually you're getting to the point where you're not going to cut anymore. You have nothing left to cut. The Fanatic right now, I believe, has 7 full-time employees that are on-air staff. 7. That might be 2 more. It might actually just be 1 more than WIP has on their morning show. Now, the Beasleys would come in and go, well, we don't want to be Odyssey because Odyssey, they filed bankruptcy. Okay, well, Odyssey's kicking your ass. And at this point, for the program director, whose name I won't even mention because I have little to no respect for the guy, when the program director will sit there and have a Zoom call because he lives 2 hours away and only pops into the office once every 3 weeks, when he talks about winning, it's as if it's the Oakland A's owner last season talking about winning with the team. Like, dude, winning what? You have 7 full-time employees. You're cutting people left and right. You're bringing back guys that are 67 years old. It's a very, very poorly run company. And at this point, it's a poorly run station. Because they basically hired Joe Girardi. The program director has an incredible resume, and it became obvious he didn't know what he was doing when he talked about how the NBA draft has 3 rounds. That's what you're dealing with. And this might sound like sour grapes to some people. I was fine when I got let go because I was miserable in what I was doing. I had never believed less in the direction of the station because of this guy. And I knew that my time was probably going to come to an end in December when my contract was up anyway, and they weren't going to re-up. The funny thing about the radio industry is it's all about how much talent you have and how much money you bring in. And how much money you bring in is 80% of whether or not you will actually keep a job or if they think they can sell you. Talent really doesn't matter. If you have connections, you will end up having a job. It's primarily about who you know and not about how good you are. And that's really it. And if you look at the talent that this station has lost over the last, let's talk about 5 years, since Beasley took over, it is astounding how much talent they've lost. John Marks leaves, go to IP, kicks Missinelli's ass for 3 years. 97.5 has a chance to bring John Marks back, and what do? No. We're not going to bring back the younger guy who kicked Missinelli's ass so badly. No. We're not going to do that. We're going to bring back Mike because we think we can sell him. Because we think we can call all of his former sponsors and we can easily get a paycheck. How's that working out? You end up losing Harry Mays. Harry Mays was one of the most beloved hosts on the station. You end up losing the other most beloved host on the station, Devon Givens, who went to PHLY. Anthony Gargano went to PHLY. You end up letting Jamie Lynch go. I can tell you firsthand, Jamie was the glue that held our morning show together. And he was a casualty cut of like, oh, we need to cut salary. Sorry, Jamie, nothing you do. Yeah, you're talented. Everybody likes you. You're good. You know what you're talking about. Cut. He ends up going to PHLY. I got let go. I won't include myself with the talent, though. Bob Cooney gets cut. You just look at the roster of people that have left the station, whether they left on their own accord or because the station decided to do more cuts, which they do seemingly every single quarter, and you could build an all-star lineup of talent. I mean, Joe DeCamera ends up leaving the Fanatic, goes to WIP, is dominating in the mornings. But the Fanatic will sit there and go, no. All we have to do is talk Eagles. That's what we were told. No, just talk Eagles. Wow. Never thought about doing that before. Talk Eagles. Huh. I was going to talk about, tennis and the WNBA, but yeah, no, Eagles talk. And that's the problem that the bosses fail to realize is Philadelphia is a city that wants comfort and stability. And you don't get that at the Fanatic, ever. They're constantly changing lineups. They're constantly firing people. And they fail to realize that when people get in their car, they are trained to do one thing, and they've been trained to do it for 30 years, and that is turn on WIP. You have to give them a reason not to. But even when you give them a reason not to, and even when you put on a good show, how long is that show lasting? Before some guy who's making 6 figures, who's living in Williamsport, decides, well, we got to change it up. I got to try to change things up. I'm telling you, firsthand, I am not bitter. I just hate the fact that I felt like I was an important part of that station for 13 years. I wanted the station to do good, and I still want the station to do good because I have friends over there. This is no indictment on anybody on air because I love all those people, and I'm still friends with a lot of them. But this is strictly the people that are getting paid the big bucks to drive it into the ground. And that is exactly what's happening. Whether it be from the Beasleys or an absentee dad program director who will love to remind you that, you know, he worked at ESPN National. Cool. I mean, I could really, really roast that, but I won't. It's sad. It's sad what's become, because the Fanatic had a winning lineup and a winning formula. And it's not just this program director, but like previous program directors who I actually all had a really good relationship with. But they all failed to put the right lineup together, and the talent was clearly there. And it was frustrating for me because it's like, you guys can't see the forest of the trees here. Like, think about this. They won it, and it would fail, and now we see what's happened, where you've got a skeleton crew running things, and it's the Titanic. Everybody seems to recognize it. No one realized that, you know, the iceberg hit. And it's sad, because I want this station to do good. I specifically, as an intern, joined 97.5 because I thought it was the young upstart station that could compete with WIP. And for a while it was, and I loved my time there. But when it became obvious, and a lot of it was like post Beasley, but when it became obvious that they weren't really interested in winning ratings at all, then it was like, what are we doing here? And then it got even worse and worse and worse and worse. Because what people fail to realize is, even if you're not necessarily winning in the ratings, you can still sell some of these people. And the Fanatic was making money. MMR makes a ton of money. Like, the Philadelphia cluster makes money. The problem is, it's like places like Charlotte don't. Places like Detroit, I don't know how they're doing, but I doubt it's great. So, like, that's one of the issues. And when you constantly are having turnover, it's tough. It's a tough sell. So if you ever wonder, like, why did the Fanatic let this guy go and not this guy who everybody can't stand, or this guy who I don't like, or whatever, it's usually just a strictly money thing. Can they sell him? Does the sales department really have the effort in them to sell him? Because sometimes it does take effort to, like, actually go out there and be like, oh, hey, like, this guy's great. Here's the reasons why, as opposed to, oh, hey, here's a name. It's sad. It really is. I feel for Tyrone. Tyrone deserved better. I did a show with Tyrone that, like, nobody listened to, but we had a good time. And him getting let go is no indictment of his talent. It's an indictment of the company. The company will tell you it's an indictment of the industry. No, it's look in the mirror. You know, I mean, I can tell you right now, the Beasleys are not ordering the cheap Uber carpools. They're not flying coach. They're not flying Frontier. If they do a tour of Italy, it's not me and you doing a tour of Italy, which is at the Olive Garden, where we get chicken parm, pasta primavera, and some fettuccine. They do a tour of Italy, and it's Athens, which is Greece. So hit thumbs down for that. But it's sad, and I hate it. And that station is not going to end up doing well until they actually get an actual program director in there who is in the building every day and realizes, like, what Philadelphia sports is all about. And this guy is just not it. He likes baseball. But other than that, I don't really have a ton of respect for him. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that when I got let go, never heard from him. I was let go by the big boss. And I was fine with it, once again. But, you know, I think it's kind of a piece of shit move to let your longest tenured employee go and you don't even reach out. But once again, we didn't have I don't think we had a great working relationship. I think he treated me like I was a 22-year-old who was supposed to be happy to be there. And it was like, dude, I've been in this industry a little bit. I know what this is. I know what you're doing to me. And he would try to gaslight me like crazy. So I kind of have a vendetta against that guy. Everybody else, though, in that building, I have a great relationship with still. I know some people will see this and probably reach out and text me about it and whatever. Some people will say, you shouldn't be burning a bridge. That's how we started this out. I'll say this guy is old. And even if I burn a bridge for 3 years, oh well. You know, he's not the future of the industry. He is so far the past. And as far as the Beasleys burning a bridge with them, it's only a matter of time before they sell. They're going to go bankrupt. They're going to end up selling their father's company. And you're going to have Roman Roy sitting in a hotel lobby wondering, where do I go from here? Because they don't have a clue. And trust me, I could give you many, many examples. I did a whole TikTok on this when they let people go last October, and I had people reaching out from Beasley stations that I did not know. I mean, Beasley stations around the country are like, hey, just to let you know, like, this is circulating in our little cluster. Like, we love it. They can't voice that, obviously, because they're worried about their jobs. Everybody needs to eat. Everybody's got bills to pay. but it is a horribly run company. They don't know what they're doing. And that is why you have a situation like you did with Tyrone being let go when he didn't deserve it. So I'll get off my soapbox now. It's unfortunate. I really do want that station to do well, but it's tough when you know that it won't. And you know that it won't because of the people in charge. Because it's a good old boys network, and, well, I mean, this was my buddy from 20 years ago, so I'm going to bring him in to be the program director. And okay, yeah, sure that'll do well. It's not doing well. And I feel like the scene from Remember the Titans, I'll end with this, but I feel like the scene from Remember the Titans where it's post game, they want to go out to eat, and Sunshine wants to go into the bar, and PD goes, "No, we shouldn't go in there, man." And Sunshine's like, "No, I'll be fine. And they go in there, and even though the bar's empty, the bar owner's racist, and he says, "No, we're not serving your kind." And Sunshine's all shocked, and he goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, man, I didn't know." And PD's like, "How did you not know? How did you not? I told you." The Fanatic failing is me sitting there going, how did you not know? How in the world did you not figure out that this would not work? Yeah. So in future reference, if you're looking for a guy to run a station, probably don't hire somebody that's only going to be there 3 times a month, maybe, and lives 2 hours away. I'll end on that. Hey, go Birds.